What if the greatest luxury car Detroit ever built wasn't a Cadillac or a Lincoln, but a machine history completely left behind? This is Chassis in Time, and I spend way too much time thinking about forgotten classic American luxury cars. If you're someone who loves massive displacement V8s, mid-century Detroit styling, and the wild stories behind the greatest overlooked highway cruisers in history, make sure to hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if this helps you out. When you look back at the 1960s, American automotive luxury was defined by a handful of undisputed corporate heavyweights. If you made it to the top of the corporate ladder, you bought a Cadillac DeVille. If you wanted understated architectural elegance, you parked a suicide door Lincoln Continental in your driveway. And if you wanted personal flair, you bought a Ford Thunderbird. But here's what most people don't realize. Lurking in the shadows of those sales giants was a secondary tier of machinery that was often faster, better engineered, and far more exclusive than anything carrying a wreath or a star badge. We are talking about genuine land yachts that packed the horsepower of a muscle car, the footprint of a studio apartment, and standard equipment lists that read like science fiction for the era. Yet somehow, decades later, they vanished from automotive memory. Let's start with an absolute titan from 1968, the Imperial Crown. Now, you might be thinking, isn't an Imperial just a fancy Chrysler New Yorker with some extra chrome slapped onto the fenders? Look, that was the exact misconception Chrysler spent millions of marketing dollars trying to fight. Back in 1955, Chrysler officially spun Imperial off into its own standalone marque, specifically to wage war against Cadillac and Lincoln. Imperial had its own dedicated assembly line, its own rigorous quality control inspections, and a completely different design language. By 1968, the Crown occupied the absolute sweet spot of the Imperial lineup, slotted right below the ultra-exclusive LeBaron. And the sheer scale of this automobile was staggering. The 1968 Imperial Crown measured an astonishing 224.5 inches in total length. That is roughly 18.7 feet of pure American sheet metal, making it longer than a Lincoln Continental and practically matching the Cadillac Fleetwood for total driveway real estate. Visually, it looked like a rolling bank vault designed by an architect who only owned a straightedge. You had an enormous die-cast grille, horizontal body-side character lines that ran uninterrupted from headlight to taillight, and rear lighting that spanned nearly the full width of the deck lid. Step inside, and it was essentially a high-end mid-century living room on four wheels. The cabin offered seating for 6 adults on seats padded with thick foam and trimmed in rich brocade cloth or hand-selected leather. Imperial gave you an instrument panel with brushed metal surfaces, recessed gauges, and deep pile carpeting that felt like walking barefoot across an upscale hotel suite. If you had the cash, you could option it with dual-unit air conditioning, 6-way power seats, power windows, and an electroluminescent interior lighting setup that made the dashboard look like the cockpit of a jetliner at night. Here's the thing. All that luxury required a serious financial commitment. In 1968, a 2-door Imperial Crown hardtop carried a base price of roughly $5,721, while the 4-door sedan pushed well past $6,100 before you checked a single option box. To put that into perspective, $5,700 in 1968 had the equivalent purchasing power of around $50,000 today, which placed the Imperial squarely in the crosshairs of Cadillac Series 62 and DeVille lineup. To move this mountain of steel, Imperial didn't cut any corners. Beneath that massive, expansive hood sat Chrysler's legendary 440 cubic inch TNT V8. Equipped with a 4-barrel carburetor and dual exhaust, this engine churned out 350 horsepower and a monumental 480 pound-feet of torque. Paired with Chrysler's bulletproof 3-speed torque-flight automatic transmission, the Imperial moved with the smooth, effortless surge of a corporate jet taking off. It didn't snap your neck like a roadrunner, but it would carry you down the interstate at 90 miles per hour in utter, tomb-like silence. So why did this magnificent cruiser vanish from the history books? This is where it gets really interesting. Despite having arguably superior engineering, Chrysler simply could not crack the prestige armor of General Motors and Ford. In 1968, Imperial managed to build and sell only 15,367 cars across its entire model line. By comparison, Cadillac built over 230,000 automobiles that same year. Cadillac was an established cultural status symbol. Imperial was an intellectual choice made by doctors, architects, and independent thinkers who appreciated Chrysler's unibody strength and torsion bar ride. When the collector car world looks back at the late 60s, Cadillac and Lincoln suck all the air out of the room, leaving the 1968 Imperial Crown as one of the most unfairly neglected grand flagships ever produced. Next up, let's take a trip back to 1963 and look at the Oldsmobile Starfire. Before the Buick Riviera became the universally celebrated poster child for the American personal luxury movement, Oldsmobile was already quietly perfecting the exact same recipe. The Starfire occupied a truly fascinating niche inside General Motors. It wasn't an entry-level family sedan, and it wasn't an ordinary full-size dynamic 88. Oldsmobile positioned the Starfire above the Super 88, combining the imposing footprint of a full-size car with the intimate, driver-focused cockpit of a genuine personal luxury grand tourer. For 1963, the Starfire received a striking styling update that gave it one of the most distinctive rooflines of the decade. Oldsmobile designers crafted a squared-off roof featuring a unique concave rear window. It gave the Starfire a sharp, formal silhouette that curiously mirrored the Pontiac Grand Prix, but with an extra dose of Oldsmobile elegance. The side profile was dominated by brushed aluminum spear trim that ran the entire length of the lower body, signaling to everyone on the street that this machine was exceptional. Open the door of the 1963 Starfire, and you were greeted by an interior that felt less like a traditional family cruiser and more like a private executive jet. Oldsmobile loaded this car with premium standard equipment that other manufacturers charged a fortune for as optional extras. You got genuine leather-trimmed front bucket seats, a sports-styled center console housing a floor-mounted transmission shifter, a functional tachometer positioned right between the front occupants, an electric clock, power steering, power brakes, dual exhausts, and GM's smooth Hydra-matic automatic transmission. In an era when most full-size American cars still had vinyl bench seats and column shifters, the Starfire's cabin was an absolute masterclass in driver-focused sophistication. Under that sculpted hood was pure Oldsmobile muscle. The Starfire was powered by a high-output version of the 394 cubic inch rocket V8, topped with a 4-barrel carburetor and running a stout 10.5-to-1 compression ratio. This power plant generated 345 horsepower and an immense 440 pound-feet of torque. That was enough muscle to propel this 2-ton luxury cruiser from 0 to 60 miles per hour in roughly 8.5 seconds, which was remarkably fast for a full-size car in 1963. Oldsmobile proudly marketed the Starfire as its full-size sports car, and on the open road, it delivered a commanding blend of high-speed cruising stability and effortless acceleration. Now, you might be thinking, if the Starfire was this good, why didn't it dominate the market? Here's the thing. It all came down to price and fierce internal competition. In 1963, the Starfire hardtop started at approximately $4,129, while the convertible commanded a hefty $4,742. That made the Starfire one of the most expensive automobiles in the entire Oldsmobile showroom, pushing directly into Cadillac territory. At the same time, the personal luxury segment was exploding with ferocious new rivals. The Ford Thunderbird had already established itself as the king of the personal coupe market. Pontiac was eating up showroom traffic with the wildly successful Grand Prix. And to make matters worse, General Motors introduced the razor-sharp 1963 Buick Riviera, an automobile whose groundbreaking styling instantly captured the public imagination. As a result, Starfire sales took a brutal hit. After selling nearly 42,000 units during its breakout 1962 model year, Oldsmobile production plunged to 25,549 units in 1963, of which only 4,401 were convertibles. The Starfire nameplate survived for just a few more years before quietly fading into obscurity, completely overshadowed by icons like the Riviera and the 442. That brings us to our third car, and if there is one machine on this list that proves how difficult it is to change public perception, it is the 1967 AMC Ambassador DPL. Look, when you think of American Motors Corporation during the 1960s, what comes to mind? For most people, AMC conjures up images of compact, sensible, ultra-economical cars like the Rambler American. AMC built its reputation on frugality, rational engineering, and compact dimensions under former President George Romney. But by 1967, new company leadership under Roy Abernethy decided to pivot hard and challenge the Big Three directly in every single market segment, including the lucrative personal luxury category. The spearhead of that ambitious offensive was the redesigned 1967 AMC Ambassador. AMC stretched the Ambassador's wheelbase to 118 inches, gave it longer, crisp body lines, stacked quad headlights, and an imposing upright grille. At the top of the pyramid sat the DPL series, which officially stood for Diplomat. AMC went to incredible lengths to make the Ambassador DPL look and feel like a genuine prestige automobile. Step inside, and you found standard custom reclining bucket seats, a padded center console, rich wood-grain trim accents along the dashboard and door panels, and thick pile carpeting. AMC even offered options like an 8-track stereo system, cruise control, and their legendary Weather-Eye dual air conditioning system, which was widely considered one of the best climate control setups in the entire industry. Under the hood, AMC offered a brand-new 343 cubic inch Typhoon V8. Equipped with a 4-barrel carburetor, dual exhausts, and a 10.2-to-1 compression ratio, this engine produced a very respectable 280 horsepower and 365 pound-feet of torque. Backed by AMC's Shift-Command 3-speed automatic transmission, the Ambassador DPL moved with surprising agility and silence. To build consumer confidence, AMC backed the car with their famous 5-year or 50,000-mile powertrain warranty, which was among the most aggressive warranties in Detroit. Here's what most people don't realize. Despite offering Buick-level comfort and performance for hundreds of dollars less, AMC ran headfirst into an insurmountable psychological wall. In the luxury world, the badge on the radiator grille is everything. American buyers simply could not reconcile paying premium money for a car produced by the same company that built economy Ramblers. AMC sold just over 14,000 Ambassador DPL hardtops and convertibles in 1967. Over time, AMC's legacy became defined by quirky compacts like the Gremlin and Pacer, or muscle machines like the AMX and Javelin. The Ambassador DPL was entirely forgotten, leaving behind a fascinating footnote of what happens when a plucky independent tries to out-luxury Detroit's elite. Now, what happens when an automaker decides to take a full-size luxury coupe and inject it with the heart and soul of an unapologetic muscle car? You get our fourth car, the 1969 Mercury Marauder X100. Measuring over 18 feet in length and tipping the scales at nearly 4,200 pounds, the Marauder X100 was an absolute visual spectacle. Mercury took the chassis of their full-size marquee sedan and gave it a dramatic semi-fastback roofline with sweeping rear quarter panels and flying buttresses. Up front, it featured the elegant hidden headlight grille from the marquee. But out back, the design went completely wild. The rear decklid and roof pillars were finished in a matte black two-tone paint treatment, complemented by rear fender skirts and unique 5-spoke aluminum wheels. Inside, buyers could choose twin comfort lounge seating or bucket seats with a console, surrounded by a rim-blow steering wheel, walnut simulated trim, and a high level of whisper-quiet standard automotive insulation. Press the accelerator on that Marauder, and you instantly realized this was no ordinary, floaty boulevard barge. Beneath that long steel hood was Ford's brand-new 429 cubic inch Thunderjet V8, breathing through a massive 4-barrel carburetor. It pumped out 360 horsepower and a staggering 480 pound-feet of torque. Period tests recorded 0 to 60 times in well under 8 seconds, which was utterly mind-boggling for a car with the curb weight of a loaded pickup truck. It was essentially a 2-ton executive suite with the acceleration of a hot rod. The problem was positioning. The Marauder X100 started at $4,091, but once you checked off desirable options like air conditioning and power assists, the sticker easily sailed past $5,000. At $5,000, buyers were standing in Lincoln and Cadillac showrooms. The X100 was too massive to appeal to pure muscle car buyers looking for a Cyclone or a Mustang, yet too aggressive and eccentric for conservative luxury buyers shopping for an Eldorado or a Continental Mark III. Mercury built 5,635 examples for 1969, and just 2,646 in 1970 before pulling the plug permanently. It remains one of the wildest, most torque-rich personal luxury experiments Detroit ever attempted. Now, let's look at car number 5, a machine created under circumstances that would have broken any other automaker, the 1962 Studebaker Gran Turismo Hawk. By the start of the 1962 model year, Studebaker was facing a corporate crisis that GM or Ford could barely fathom. The historic South Bend manufacturer was hemorrhaging cash, bleeding market share, and lacked the capital budget to engineer an all-new luxury platform from scratch. The existing Hawk Coupe's underlying chassis dated all the way back to the famous 1953 Starliner designed by Robert Burt. Most industry insiders assumed Studebaker would simply let the Hawk wither away and die. Enter Sherwood Egbert, Studebaker's newly appointed president, who refused to go down without a fight. With practically zero budget, Egbert hired legendary industrial designer Brooks Stevens and gave him an almost impossible task: modernize the aging Hawk into a competitive luxury coupe in just 6 months. Instead of trying to hide the car's vintage proportions with more chrome, Stevens executed a stroke of pure genius. He stripped away the heavy 1950s tailfins, squared off the roofline with formal, Mercedes-Benz-inspired C-pillars, cleaned up the body sides, and added an upright, European-style radiator grille. The result was a dramatic aesthetic transformation. Overnight, the Hawk morphed from a dated finned coupe into a sophisticated, understated European-style Grand Tourer. The transformation inside was even more striking. Stevens designed a completely fresh dashboard covered in faux wood grain and brushed aluminum, featuring an array of round, aircraft-style gauges including a tachometer and manifold pressure gauge. The cabin featured deep bucket seats, a floor-mounted 4-speed manual or automatic transmission selector, and an intimate, sports-focused ambience that stood in stark contrast to the bloated, sofa-like interiors of contemporary Detroit sedans. Under the hood, the GT Hawk was powered by Studebaker's rugged 289 cubic inch V8, producing up to 225 horsepower in standard 4-barrel trim, with supercharged Avanti R-Series engines available later for buyers demanding serious speed. And here's the kicker. Studebaker priced the 1962 Gran Turismo Hawk at an extremely competitive $3,095. The automotive press raved, and the buying public responded immediately. Studebaker built 9,335 units in 1962, more than double the previous year's Hawk sales. For a brief moment, it looked like Stevens had pulled off a miracle. Look, Brooks Stevens could save the Hawk, but he couldn't save South Bend. Studebaker's dealer network was shrinking, and corporate finances continued to collapse. GT Hawk production dropped to 4,634 units in 1963. In December of 1963, Studebaker shuttered its South Bend automobile plant forever, ending over a century of vehicle production in Indiana. The Gran Turismo Hawk died along with it, vanishing into the pages of forgotten automotive history despite being one of the cleanest, most sophisticated Grand Tourers America ever produced. That brings us to our sixth car, the 1964 Chrysler 300K. For a decade, Chrysler's 300-letter series represented the undisputed pinnacle of American performance luxury. Beginning with the 1955 C300, these cars dominated early NASCAR tracks while offering hand-tailored leather interiors and commanding road manners. They were known as the banker's hot rods, sophisticated enough for high society, but packing enough firepower to embarrass dedicated sports cars. By 1964, however, Chrysler faced a serious dilemma. The previous year's 300J had been priced at a staggering $5,185, resulting in an abysmal production total of just 400 cars. To save the line, Chrysler made a strategic pivot with the 1964 300K. They slashed the base price by more than $1,100, bringing the entry point down to approximately $4,056 for the hardtop coupe. This price adjustment did not mean the 300K was watered down under the hood. As standard equipment, Chrysler installed its massive 413 cubic inch Wedge V8, breathing through a 4-barrel carburetor and producing 360 horsepower. For buyers who wanted true letter car dominance, an optional dual-quad cross-ram setup pushed output to a thumping 390 horsepower. Inside, the 300K retained its grand touring pedigree. It featured contoured front bucket seats upholstered in genuine leather, a full-length center console, a new floor-mounted transmission shifter, and comprehensive instrumentation. It measured over 17.5 feet long and weighed well over 4,100 pounds, but with Chrysler's heavy-duty torsion bar suspension, it handled with a poise that baffled drivers accustomed to floaty GM and Ford luxury yacht. The aggressive price cut worked wonders for production numbers. Chrysler built 3,647 examples of the 300K in 1964, consisting of 3,022 hardtops and 625 convertibles, a massive 9-fold jump compared to the 300J. But here's what most people don't realize. In making the car more accessible, Chrysler inadvertently diluted the exclusivity that made the letter series so revered. With non-letter 300 models flooding showrooms, the prestige faded. Following the 1965 300L, the legendary series ended forever. If you had to pick one classic Mopar cruiser from that era, would you take this 300K? Tell me below. Now let's move to car number 7. A vehicle that proves an essential truth about the classic car world. A car doesn't have to be a sales flop to end up completely forgotten. We are talking about the 1968 Buick Electra 225 Custom. Affectionately known across America as the Deuce and a Quarter, the Electra 225 was the absolute crown jewel of Buick's traditional full-size lineup, sitting majestically above the LeSabre and Wildcat. The 225 was not just a clever marketing badge. It was a literal declaration of physical presence, representing the car's overall length of practically 225 inches. That is nearly 18.7 feet of automobile riding on a massive 126-inch wheelbase. With its rear fender skirts partially concealing the back wheels, long horizontal body lines, and substantial chrome brightwork, the Electra 225 Custom perfectly embodied Detroit's golden rule of executive luxury: longer, wider, lower, and quieter. Stepping up to the custom trim elevated the interior into the realm of bespoke luxury. Buick trimmed the cabin in premium notchback bench seating or custom vinyl and cloth combinations, surrounded by thick insulation, power windows, automatic climate control, and a steering wheel that felt featherlight in your hands. Under that gargantuan hood, Buick gave the Electra a power plant worthy of its flagship status. Every 1968 Electra rolled out of the factory with Buick's new 430 cubic inch big block V8. Breathing through a Rochester Quadrajet 4-barrel carburetor, this powerhouse cranked out 360 horsepower and a colossal 475 pound-feet of torque. Routed through General Motors' bulletproof Super Turbine 400 automatic transmission, the Electra didn't accelerate so much as it gathered momentum like an ocean liner riding a swell. It offered an eerily quiet, floating ride that ironed out every imperfection on the American highway. Here's what most people don't realize. The Electra 225 Custom gave you roughly 95% of the Cadillac experience for a massive discount. In 1968, an Electra 225 Custom Sport Coupe had a base price of around $4,396. A comparable Cadillac Coupe DeVille commanded over $5,520. That was a price difference of more than $1,100, serious money back then. And buyers responded in droves. Buick sold over 50,000 four-door custom hardtops alone in 1968, along with more than 16,000 custom sport coupe. So why don't people talk about the Electra today? Because it got trapped in a historical blind spot. Pop culture remembered Cadillac as the definitive status symbol, design purists remembered the Riviera, and performance fans obsessed over the Buick GSX muscle cars. The Electra 225 Custom was simply too good and too mainstream to be scandalous, causing it to slip silently beneath the radar of modern car culture. That same phenomenon explains our eighth car, the 1968 Oldsmobile 98 Holiday Coupe. If you walked into an Oldsmobile dealership in 1968 with a pocket full of cash and demanded the ultimate expression of Lansing luxury, the 98 was your chariot. The 98 had served as Oldsmobile's flagship model since 1941, and the Holiday Coupe represented the pinnacle of that legacy in a sleek, pillarless two-door hardtop body style. Measuring 223.7 inches long on a 126-inch wheelbase, the 98 Holiday Coupe had a commanding presence that made modern full-size SUVs look compact. Oldsmobile stylists gave the 1968 model a noticeably cleaner, more tailored look than its predecessors, replacing unnecessary surface ornamentation with crisp fender lines and a recessed front grille flanked by dual headlamp. Inside, the 98 Holiday Coupe was pure mid-century executive opulence. Oldsmobile fitted the cabin with an electric clock, custom luxury steering wheel, deep-loop carpeting, and deeply cushioned seating finished in rich fabrics, heavy-duty vinyl, or optional supple leather. Power steering, power front disc brakes, and the turbo-hydromatic 400 transmission came standard. This is where it gets really interesting. For the 1968 model year, Oldsmobile dropped their previous 425 cubic inch V8 in favor of the legendary new 455 cubic inch Rocket V8. In the 98, this massive engine generated 365 horsepower and an astonishing 510 pound-feet of torque at just 3,000 revolutions per minute. That immense low-end torque allowed the 4,400-pound Holiday Coupe to pull away from stoplights with silent, unstoppable authority. Starting at roughly $4,360, the Holiday Coupe was among the most expensive Oldsmobiles available, outpriced only by the 98 convertible and the revolutionary front-wheel drive Tornado. Oldsmobile produced over 15,000 Holiday Coupes in 1968, satisfying a loyal clientele of executives and professionals. Yet today, when car enthusiasts discuss vintage Oldsmobiles, the entire conversation is dominated by the 442 muscle car and the front-drive engineering marvel that was the Tornado. The 98 Holiday Coupe was left behind, despite offering 455 cubic inches of pure Rocket V8 muscle, nearly 19 feet of majestic sheet metal, and flagship comfort that rivaled the finest cars in the world. Now let's look at car number 9. The 1966 Dodge Monaco 500. Today, the Dodge Monaco nameplate is often associated with the massive four-door sedans of the mid-1970s or iconic movie police interceptors. But back in 1966, the Monaco was born as something entirely different. Dodge's premier personal luxury flagship. For 1966, Dodge expanded the Monaco name across a full line of full-size models, but they created a dedicated, ultra-exclusive halo model at the very top, the Monaco 500 hardtop coupe. Dodge marketing boldly positioned the Monaco 500 as the brand's style leader, aimed directly at buyers who wanted personal luxury combined with aggressive Mopar attitude. The interior of the Monaco 500 was one of the most eccentric and lavish cabins Detroit produced during the mid-60s. Up front, Dodge installed individual shell-type bucket seats separated by a full-length center console with a brushed aluminum shifter. But the real showstopper was the upholstery detailing. Dodge inlaid genuine wicker-textured vinyl inserts directly into the seatbacks and door panels. Under the hood, Dodge didn't hold back either. The Monaco 500 came standard with a 4-barrel 383 cubic inch V8 pushing 325 horsepower, while power-hungry buyers could upgrade to Chrysler's new 440 cubic inch Magnum V8, delivering 350 thumping horsepower and massive low-end torque for effortless high-speed open highway interstate touring. Now, you might be thinking, why did a car with this much style and muscle struggle in the showroom? Look, it came down to internal pricing and brand identity. The Monaco 500 started at roughly $3,604, which was more than $500 above a standard Monaco hardtop and just $21 shy of a Chrysler 300. Buyers shopping in that price range gravitated toward more prestigious nameplates, resulting in Dodge selling only around 7,300 Monaco 500s in 1966. Over time, Dodge's legendary muscle cars, the Charger, Dart GTS, and Coronet R/T, completely overshadowed this sophisticated Grand Tourer, burying one of Mopar's most unique luxury coupes in obscurity. That brings us to our 10th and final car, a machine that had the unfortunate luck of sharing showroom floor space with an instant icon, the 1963 Buick Wildcat. After debuting in 1962 as a sub-series of the Invicta, Buick spun the Wildcat off into its own standalone model line for 1963, offering a 4-door hardtop, a convertible, and a gorgeous 2-door sport coupe. Buick marketed the Wildcat as the liveliest full-size car on the road, aimed squarely at drivers who wanted executive presence without sacrificing athletic performance. The interior delivered on that promise with standard front bucket seats, a full center console with a floor shifter, and a unique console-mounted tachometer angled toward the driver. Under the hood sat Buick's legendary Wildcat 445 engine, a 401 cubic inch Nailhead V8 churning out 325 horsepower and a massive 445 pound-feet of torque. Connected to Buick's smooth turbine drive transmission, the Wildcat accelerated with seamless, unrelenting power that made this heavy luxury coupe feel surprisingly nimble. It was engineered specifically for drivers who wanted the silence of an Electra paired with the raw, pavement-ripping attitude of a grand touring sports car on long open stretches of interstate highway. Here's the tragedy of the 1963 Wildcat. It hit dealerships in the exact same year Buick unleashed the all-new 1963 Riviera. Priced at $3,849, the Wildcat Sport Coupe was only about $484 cheaper than the bespoke, Bill Mitchell-designed Riviera. The Riviera captured the design world's undivided attention, selling its entire 40,000-unit production run and cementing its place in automotive history. While the Wildcat actually sold reasonably well, including 12,185 coupes, 17,519 four-door hardtops, and 6,021 convertibles, it was permanently relegated to the Riviera's massive cultural shadow, leaving behind a magnificent performance coupe that deserved far better from automotive historians. And that brings us to the end of our journey through Detroit's forgotten luxury royalty. Every single one of these 10 automobiles offered massive V8 horsepower, incredible craftsmanship, and undeniable presence. They didn't fail because they lacked quality, innovation, or performance. They simply got lost in the shifting sands of corporate marketing, badge prestige, and muscle car nostalgia. They represent an extraordinary golden era when American automakers built rolling masterpieces without compromise, proving that true luxury was once measured in cubic inches, effortless torque, and breathtaking sheet metal. Now, I want to hear from you. Which of these 10 forgotten luxury cars was the most unfairly overlooked by history? Or is there another underrated American classic from the 1960s that belongs on this list? Drop your thoughts and nominations in the comments below. And if you loved this deep dive into Detroit's golden era, don't miss our next video exploring the most beautiful American cars of the 1960s, where we showcase the decade's greatest styling triumph. Thanks for watching Chassis and Time. Make sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the very next one.